Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. So we were talking about everything. Basically, about the role of a woman in the culture, how, the prophetic way, the blueprint that through seerahs, through Quran, through sunnah can actually help us. And now I think it's one of the best times to talk about the resetting and renewing the intentions, healing as well, and which is Ramadan, right? So I know that you both have a lot of tips to share with us. And I know that Ramia was on the previous episode was sharing about how Ramadan can actually be this like gateway and the starting point of renewal.
Yeah. So a lot of us, I guess, view Ramadan with a sort of pre-programmed mindset that it is the race, right? And it is. It's a race to do good, to excel in our spiritual progress and behavioral character sort of building and so forth. But if we reshift the way that we view it and rather treat it as the training ground. So Ramadan is actually the training ground. The rest of the year, the remainder of the year, 11 months is actually the race.
Yeah.
And when you look at it from that perspective, what you are actually doing is, we know that if you want to adopt change your way or a trait and so forth, you need, at least studies show, 30 to 40 days of repetition of some sort. You are training yourself that actually I can navigate through the day without having to eat unnecessarily.
Yes.
I can function without a coffee. I can still work. SubhanAllah, when you look at Ramadan, it's just mind-blowing and rahmah and a mercy that it is indeed an obligation upon us. If it was voluntary, I don't think many of us would do it.
So true.
What Ramadan teaches you, it teaches and trains you to push yourself to the limit, right? How is it that despite you being sleep deprived, food deprived and thirsty, you are still able to work, you are still able to stand in Taraweeh, whether it's your 8 rak'at or 20 rak'at, and wake up in the middle of the night, prepare suhoor and, pre-dawn meals, and then cook at the end of there's barakah.
So true.
Right? And that's what Ramadan does. So it's actually teaching and training you that for someone who may have written themselves off and said, I can't do it.
Yeah.
I'm not capable of doing it. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done through this month is made it an obligation upon billions of Muslims around the world. So there's that communal element. In fact, women who at times cannot fast for their, whatever reasons, feel like they are lonely when they're not partaking in the month of Ramadan.
Yeah.
Because everyone's doing it. So that communal element allows us to taste something that we are unable to taste throughout the year and push ourselves to that limit. So when you then go through, the remainder of the year and think, oh no, I can't do this, Ramadan is the time to reflect on and to teach you and to remind yourself that, no, I was able to do it. I was able to push myself and so forth. So it's a training ground for our stomach. It's a training ground and a nurturing opportunity of our ruh that's been so deprived for an entire year before then. It then allows you to free your mind and truly focus on the things that matter. You're actually more conscious of this is how taqwa is triggered, by the way. Taqwa is triggered because you are no longer scrolling endlessly on stupid feeds that bring you no benefit on your socials, for example. You're like, no, let me better direct my time to ibadah, to Quran, to tasbih, whatever it is. So your mind is then triggered to sort of, nourish and to be fulfilled. And as a result, your body, you feel better. You feel better. The only time you don't feel as good is when you've had your food coma without, any discipline.
Without the correct prophetic
I
get that, unfortunately.
And you'll talk about
and I'm guilty of this, by the way.
Followed by the sugar coma that follows. But if you follow the prophetic methodology in that, break your fast with the date and water, pray maghrib, come back. In fact, most places around the world, what they do is they don't have a full meal until after Taraweeh. So they break their fast with something very little, be it soup and so forth. They go pray Taraweeh, then they come back at the end of the night and they eat. May have issues, but I'm saying the idea behind that is that you go to pray with full energy and you're not exhausted because of the overeating aspect. So that's the thing about Ramadan. I'm looking so forward to that because it is the month where, in fact, we get, there's so much investments in today's world around the beautification of our physical, elements in terms of Botox and fillers. Well, no, Ramadan is my Botox to the heart.
MashaAllah.
Right?
Amazing.
That's the injection that I yearn for each and every year. And I pray that we all get the opportunity to taste it.
I mean.
Not the real Botox.
No,
yeah,
no.
That's
Speak a lot about that.
And by the way, you mentioned about nurturing the ruh. So before we talk about nurturing the physical body, I want to understand what are the tips or like the miracles that you think we should implement that from Sirah, from Sunnah, and from, because we know the standards of like fasting, right? But what is this formula that you found that actually injects this, energy and the right, basically, the right things that we need to gather from Ramadan, right? Because just following the rule of fasting is actually doesn't really nurture. I know a lot of people, they gain weight, they become depressed, subhanAllah. But what is this, like how to become like you? How to be this much excited and know that this is your moment to nurture your ruh?
There are higher objectives, that are centered around why it is that we fast Ramadan. Ramadan, first and foremost, the worst answer, and I know it's a perfect answer for young children, especially when they're in their primary years. Why do you fast the month of Ramadan as a Muslim? It's to feel what the poor people feel. No, that's not why. That's good. It's a great answer. But as an adult, that is not our answer. The first and foremost answer should be, it is a command from Allah Azza wa Jal. I have subscribed to the religion of Islam, and it is one of the commandments that's been obligated upon me. That's the answer.
Yeah.
What that then triggers is that absolutely everything that I do in this month and for this month is for Allah Azza wa Jal.
Okay.
So I think one of the reasons why we do get caught up, what can we do to nurture that ruh, particularly in Ramadan? And I want to focus on women in particular, because women, and I felt this during particularly having young children at the time. Your Ramadan spirituality and progress is all very circumstantial as a female. You're single, it's one thing. You get married, it's another thing. You have a child, it's another thing. That child becomes a bit difficult to contain, it's another. Your spirituality is actually at times dictated by the circumstances. What I want to tell women is that ultimately your best reward in Ramadan is focusing on your intention. That's a first. Because at times you may have that young child, you're going to see your husband walk out that door after Taraweeh and freely praying, indulging, coming back with tears rolling down his cheek, and you're thinking, how was I not able to feel that? I was busy at home. Yeah. And it took me years to sit and say to myself, you know what? This is my ibadah at home. It's okay.
Mashallah,
my intention is that I plan to feed my family, to put them to bed, my children, to put them to bed, and then to worship Allah in isolation, because that's what Allah has allowed me to do at this particular time in my life. That's good enough. I will never forget, particularly, subhanAllah, was a year in which my grandmother was in her last days, and it was in the last 2 weeks of Ramadan. So you can imagine, I was completely stripped away. The whole family was stripped away from the opportunity to go and engage in your standard acts of ibadah. Taraweeh and whatever, and we were very much centered around the hospital and so forth.
Mashallah.
Every day that I'd go to the hospital, I would talk to myself, because your inner self and inner shaitan does creep up at times. Oh, really? You're going to go and sit with your grandmother, miss out on Taraweeh tonight and waste your time and this and that? And it's very easy to be harsh. That compassion element, it starts here. So I'd talk to myself and say, surely, Ya Allah, me coming here for your sake, to look after and care for the sick, is worth in your scales a lot more than what it would be if I'd gone and prayed Taraweeh, or if I had read a whole chapter or juz of Quran and so forth. Intention is critical, especially as women, because there are going to be things that will not allow you to, experience Ramadan in the classic and traditional way. But if you focus on your intention, inshallah, you will notice that you will exit with fulfillment and contentment.
And this is so true, subhanAllah. It reminds me of this lecture with Dr. Haifa Yunus that I was watching, and it's all about, like, when children are young, actually, especially for women, you're praying your salah, which is fard, which is an obligation, right? And then in the middle of your prayer, your child is screaming. It could be anything. They were safe, they were fed, everything was planned already, but they're still screaming. Something might have happened. So I always felt this contradiction, like, subhanAllah, do I finish my prayer? You start to think now, right? Because you're trying to focus, but you're not focused anymore in your prayer. But you're thinking, should I go and take care of my child? Or should I continue the prayer, which is fard? and maybe like it's 20 minutes before the next prayer, or maybe it's only 5 minutes left to the next prayer. So she says that in this kind of moments, you should go and check your child, because that's the form of ibadah too. You're doing it because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you to do that, right? So even if you're like delaying on this moment, which is like very important, but the child needs you, Allah put the responsibility on you to take care of the child. So subhanAllah, this gave me ease as well. And I believe that whatever you do in your life, and especially in Ramadan, if you approach it this way, especially when you work, when you have to deal with things that are not necessarily helping your practice Islamically, just go back to intention. Am I doing it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Yes. Is it helping people? Is it helping my family, myself? Then
and you know
great.
yourself best. You're the best of judges. I mean, obviously, if you have the opportunity, have the time and whatever, don't be lazy and then abuse this rule.
Of course.
Oh, it's all right, I'm a female. Absolutely not. But we're saying also don't be harsh on yourself.
Yeah.
So assess your situation according to your own circumstances. I'm now in a position, alhamdulillah, my youngest is 13. I can pick up and go. We wake up in the middle of the night for qiyam. In the last 10 days, we go to the masjid. It's very different.
To what it
But
was
I wasn't there
10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
don't hold
It's
resentment and harshness towards others and yourself, by the way.
Exactly. Don't compare yourself to others. This is so important.
So just focus on your own progress and you will see the change. You'll see the change at the end, inshallah.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. So insightful, mashallah. Julide, nurturing the body. I have issues with that. You know, whenever it's Ramadan, I'm eating those cakes and like they're not helping, both visually and, you know, I don't get any energy, and spiritually, I'm pretty sure either.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
please, like, you know, what should we do? What should I do?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. And thank you so much, Ramia. You said it so beautifully. I really appreciated what Ramia said, which was, this is like you're getting ready for the 11-month marathon. Yes. This is not the marathon. And I think now when I answer that question, through the lens that Ramia has said it in terms of getting ready, I think it's a beautiful opportunity for you to implement what you can. I was speaking to one of the audience on the break, and, you know, we were talking about someone, and I'm going to give that example now, that was spending, you know, $1,000 on a particular product. Let's say it was black seed oil, let's say, for the sake of this discussion. And because they thought that that's what they can do to treat a condition that they had. And it's such an unfortunate predicament, because there is so much more that can be done foundationally that this person has possibly not the correct knowledge. So he or she has chosen an outlier thing to do when there's so many other foundational things that can be done.
Okay.
And I think the point of Ramadan, first and foremost, and we even take away from this, right? Like we even don't wake up for sahur.
Yes.
And then,
you
know, I have family, may Allah forgive us, that you look at the way Ramia looks at Ramadan. I have people in my extended environment that say, I can't wait till Ramadan is over because I want to have a coffee in the morning. And not to judge those people, but to understand that there is no spiritual caliber to their approach in Ramadan. Ramadan is very mechanical. You are hungry. And excuse me for saying this, but I could tie a donkey to a pole for a whole day and not give them food. They're not going to be any better than they were before, if they had the opportunity of eating the whole day. And I believe it is not mutually exclusive, the spiritual and the physical aspect. I believe if that was the case, we would not be created as human. We would be created as angels, because we know, they don't have a 3-dimensional body because they don't require one, right? Because they don't serve on this 3rd dimension. And on the 4th dimension, a physical body is not required. So just coming back to the question about eating, if we actually first and foremost, and just coming back to the sarcasm around the overeating, the unfortunate predicament is this: like, you go to Taraweeh and you see so many people that are burping, right? So just coming back to the conversation, first and foremost, we need to know what the I suppose, foundational requirements of Ramadan is, or fasting, like the legality around the jurisprudence around fasting. You have to wake up for sahur. You can't expect that your body will function optimally if you've missed out on a meal when you're supposed to have a meal, right? And when that meal is not sustainable, it's not proteins and carbs, fats and nutrient dense, of course, by half the day, you're going to have a massive crush, right? Or when we have diets that are void of nutrition to begin with, and we enter Ramadan and we have coffee withdrawal and we have carb withdrawal, or we don't know how to satiate or how to modulate our sense of ego in reference to our food. So we do want the cakes. And
it shocks our body, like all these changes, like sudden changes that we haven't prepared ourselves before Ramadan.
Well, you know, in Islam, it's not encouraged to even snack. because if we are constantly eating, the body is constantly engaged in this dramatic digestive process that takes up so much energy, right? So Islam is actually against snacking, but the guidelines around a diabetic is that they constantly need to eat, which is probably now changed anyway. But this is the conjecture of science. It's ever changing, and Islam is not conjecture. It doesn't change. It fits any time between 1400 years ago to now to whenever the world will come to an end, right? So I think the primary thing is implement the aspects, the foundational aspects of what fasting is, which is you have to wake up for sahur and give yourself enough time to eat. You can't scoff down a toast in 30 seconds and like swallow it and not do the digestive processes of chewing and, you know, all those digestive enzymes, and that goes into the stomach and so you need to honor your body and honor the fact that you were created human for a reason. And there is a requirement which is called chewing, which is a massive process, massively needed thing when it comes to digesting food. That's where digestion first starts. Second to that, Ramia said, you know, breaking our fast with a date. When you look at the science behind the sunnah, the date is a high glycemic food. So when you fasted the whole day and you break that fast with a high glycemic food, then your energy levels shoot up, doesn't it? Right? But it's coupled with fiber, so it really balances blood glucose a little bit, but it's a little bit high enough to wake you up. It's not like having a quinoa salad where you feel energized, but you're not jumping out of your skin. You need a little bit more oomph than that. Or if the sunnah is the salt, minerals are very important in hydration. That's why if you're dehydrated, you get an IV in a hospital. That's what water is supposed to do. Whilst the element of water is very different to what it was even 150 years ago, because of the aspect of chemicals in water and the lack of mineralization of water, in essence, it's supposed to increase your blood and liquid volume so that you wake up from this state of detoxification, right? So where you say you implement the date or the water or the salt, which could be seen, you understand scientifically why it doesn't say first sit down and eat a chicken burger or first have your biryani or whatever, right? There's a reason why do we break it with ajwa dates?
The foods that are really the finger foods, you know, like, oh, before I'll have a samosa, quick one, spring roll, and then
and that's already a meal because it's a third of your stomach. And for everyone here, right? Are you ready? Your fist is pretty much how big your stomach is. So what's really hungry is probably your alter ego or probably your nafs, right?
I love that.
Right, because this is all. And then if Rasul said it's 1/3 of this, it's not a lot of food. It's not a lot of food, right? And I think because our nutrition, though, our food is so void of nutrition that instead of eating a piece of chicken and that justifies my nutritional and protein requirements, I need to eat 17 pieces of chicken breasts before I feel full. And whilst it satiates the protein intake, you've got all these sex hormones, all this cortisol, you've got all this cholesterol and everything else in excess that has come with the protein. Because I don't know why, but we look at meat like, I'm just having my protein. It's more than that, honey. You're also having your cortisol and your estrogens and your testosterones. But again, according to government guidelines, and this is one of the reasons why we have a massive animal epidemic of an animal holocaust almost, so to speak. And when I speak about, you know, the importance of, in the seerah, our prophet, peace be upon him, he was a semi-vegetarian. And if you read any of his seerah, any of the seerahs,
meat was there occasional.
Right. And it's not because they were poor, because when they migrated to Medina, they were wealthy. So some people justify. And again, if you don't read the seerah, you don't know. So the man comes to me and says, but our prophet loved milk. Oh, really? Did he wake up and drink a cup of milk every day? Because I don't know that hadith. Please educate me, right? The reality was, when you were a desert Arab and there is not a grocery store, you don't have a plethora of food. When you are unwell and you drink a cup of milk, that satiates your nutritional needs, the immunoglobulins, the fat-soluble vitamins, right? That, and therefore it's exclusive for a situation of growth, of sickness and whatnot. It's not a situation where we need to 24/7 consume. And, you know, in our cultures, we know, right, guys, for everyone who's married, like most Muslim men, for the Muslim men here, if it's a meal without meat, it's not a meal. Like, okay, thank you for the fasulia. What did you cook that? You know what I mean?
This is my dad. Oh my gosh, I had this story. I'm sorry, out of context, but subhanAllah, we had some drama, and my mom is like calling me. She's like, astaghfirullah, like, I cannot believe what happened when your dad was there. And I'm like, oh, what do you mean? Well, he said that you didn't give him any meat. And the way the phrase was put, I didn't give him any meat.
Yeah,
I was like, astaghfirullah, what does it mean?
Yeah.
But this is the first time I'm like, I just got married and he came to my house, so he was expecting probably a head of a sheep, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, it was,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
totally
Just with what you're saying, subhanAllah, you're prompting just this ideas. The way you're describing food and, you know, even the chewing and it's like you're prompting us to be present.
Yeah, absolutely.
In absolutely everything that when we're eating, whereas we're just like
Rush.
like you're saying, even the chewing.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and subhanAllah, that's part of taqwa.
Yeah,
That's why
absolutely.
it's conscious presence.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
even presence in the way you eat.
Absolutely.
You know, it's
absolutely. And
I'm
it's
going to implement this.
I love that. I
Inshallah,
really appreciate it. And if we did have that level of consciousness,
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're not going to need the 16 chicken wings. You're actually just going to need a few.
Yeah.
Because, and even now, imagine what we do to our kids. iPads in front of them, watching something while they eat breakfast. So you're disconnecting that child's ability to regulate their satiation, right?
Yeah.
So that their body, like, are you full? Well, you better eat that plate, because if you don't, there's poor people in third world countries. And this is why we have an obesity epidemic too. Honestly, much of us, from a traditional standpoint, come from second and third world countries that are war-torn, that are famished with hunger, right? As a result, your subconscious mind carries this, especially our mother-in-laws and our grandparents, especially for our generation, that a healthy child is an overweight child. A healthy child is one that eats everything. And the only problem with sugar is that it gives you energy. If that was the case, I would be on sugar all the time, right? Oh, don't worry, just give him a little bit of sugar. He'll just be a little bit energized. It's an anti-nutrient. It demolishes stem cells. It affects the lining of the gut. It is literally the primary cause of so many nutritional deficiencies because our gut function is affected by the damage the sugar does to our gut lining. And then we are the parents that feel bad because we didn't give our child that non-halal, because it's got cochineal in it, 120.
Oh my gosh.
E120,
Yes.
approved in Europe.
Red
right,
color.
Right. And no one knows. Like I put up on my Instagram the other day, Pascal, definitely not a plug-in for you, Pascal marshmallows, and halal certified. But if you go on their website, they're like, eat in discretion, because 120 is a natural color, but natural doesn't mean it's from a plant, right? It comes from crushed cochineal bugs.
Yes.
And again, I don't think we need to be sheikhs to understand, are we allowed to eat bugs? From an ethical, from a sustainability perspective, we were having the discussion around crustaceans, right? And, you know, Guzelya and I follow the Hanafi school of thought. And whilst it's permissible, when we look at the biology of marine animals, you know, every crustacean has been created to clean their bottom feeders, man. They're yuck. They're full of mercury. They're full of plasticides. They're full of heavy metals. You know, 2 land sizes of Italy worth of plastic floats in the ocean. It is called the what? It's not coming to the Great Garbage Patch, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. I encourage everyone to look on that. And then we live in a society where we're still encouraged to eat salmon as a health food. Like when we're on a diet, it's chicken breast, it's tuna salads. The worst proteins you can ever get is what we're encouraged to eat. And that's because we follow these nutritionists without any conscious awareness, right? Without conscious presence, where we go, oh, if that's what Julide said, well, she must be right. Why?
You look into it.
Right.
So
and logic kind of go, yeah, you say that, but you know how much fish was eaten then? Are we really supposed to eat so much fish? Like people worry about mercury in fish, worry about the plastic in fish, plasticide. And if you look at the research, and this is going to be a very controversial topic, but I'm still going to touch on it because I love controversy. There's a growing body of evidence that is speaking about how, you know, our desire to transgender is as a result of endocrine disruption. And that means, in lay terms, our desire to change our gender is because we have so much external exposure of synthetic endocrine disruptors such as plasticides and herbicides and pesticides. And as a result, it's really affecting the biochemistry of our reproductive organs. Now, I'm not saying this. There is a plethora of literature that states how this is affecting us. And so maybe as Muslims, instead of looking at meat as a form of, this is a protein for me, we might actually look at it for what it is.
Yeah.
And it's the king of food. You don't have to go to the king every day. It's okay to go to the king. You know, there's Sahih Hadith in Bukhari, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when he was asked, you know, why is there no smoke coming out of your chimney? And he said, because we eat barley and dates. Like, there wasn't much cooking, right?
Yeah.
And again, you can justify that as being poor or whatever until the cows come home. We know that Islam rose and had numerous years of wealth and prosperity before the challenges came in Medina again, right? So I think for me, coming back to the Ramadan question, I urge people to go back to understanding the foundations of fasting, like literally wake up for sahur, break your fast with what is in the sunnah of breaking our fast. Make sure you have enough time to drink water so you're not dehydrated. And also what Ramia said, you know, Ramadan gives us an understanding of this spiritual caliber where we will function at an optimum rate even without worldly things that need to satiate the physical body otherwise. And that's Allah showing us the miracle of Islam through the experience of Ramadan and fasting.
That's awesome. Like these fundamentals, like just chewing, being present, you know, and relation of it towards taqwa. It's literal connection of the body and the soul. Yeah, definitely, inshallah. Thank you so much. I believe that everybody here, you know, also will inshallah implement this. So we spoke about the mind and the heart, the intentions, right? Whenever we go into this training ground of Ramadan, so that we can, you know, keep up with this. We also spoke about food. I want to touch this thing because it's very important in today's world, which is about advocacy and the oppression that's happening around the world. Whether it is Ramadan, whether it's festivities, the injustices are still happening. What can we do during this blessed month where, you know, prayers are being, like, du'as being answered, right? And the miracles happening. And people are becoming more patient, we becoming more patient. Sometimes we don't have much energy because of all these responsibilities and the focus that we need to do in order to worship in a proper way, to think a little beyond ourselves and our families.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as a leader in community who's you know, pushing the advocacy towards Palestinians, towards oppressed and any other injustices, Ramia, like, how would you suggest people to approach the advocacy, especially when we're now focused on rebuilding Gaza, inshallah?
So Ramadan's an ample opportunity that we cannot miss, in a sense that one of the, if you want to call it weapons, we use that word, weapons that a believer does indeed have is dua.
Yeah.
And, you know, subhanAllah, just yesterday I went to a screening of a release by One Path of a brother who just went to Syria to, you know, just document some of the things that he saw in light of the liberation that took place, and picked up on something in that, you know, victory is there. Like, we know that victory will be there. The justice will be served, whether in this dunya or the next life, but we have to be worthy of it, right? And one of the comments that were made by numerous Syrians that were interviewed on the ground, and inshallah Gaza is next and Palestine is next and so forth, was that it was a miracle. Even the Syrians couldn't believe what had happened. What unfolded in 10 days was a miracle, indifferent to the miracles of the Battle of Badr, a battle that took place in the blessed month of Ramadan, right? The various miracles that took place in the Sirah, where the Muslims were, you know, just a handful compared to the other side. There is divine intervention here.
Always.
The only thing that we miss, I feel, subhanAllah, is that, you know, when we ask Mata Nasrullah, you know, when will the victory of Allah Azza wa Jal come? We really need to ask it at a time where we truly feel like we are worthy of it and we own it. And what I mean by this is, have we perfected the states of our inner first?
Absolutely.
Are we worthy? You know, when you have studied hard, done your best, you know, you've been up all night memorizing and so forth, and you've got that exam. What the result is fine, but you can at least look back and, you know, I'm worthy. I tried my best. I studied. I put in the effort. Right? So this Ramadan, in light of, I guess, what we've been shown even by the resilience and steadfastness of the people of Gaza in particular, they've lost everything. There is nothing left for them. You know, you cannot think, you know, when we are told as believers that, yes, indeed, you know, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ. Allah Azza wa Jal tells us that indeed you shall be tested One of 4 things, if not all. Something of fear, hunger, loss of life, loss of wealth. People of Gaza have experienced it all in one go. One massive test. But they have remained steadfast. And that steadfastness and perseverance and the resilience that we witness does not come from thin air. It comes from work, from hard work. And I remember when I visited Al-Aqsa in 2014, at the time, subhanAllah, when things were somewhat, not the best, but somewhat. The locals who would take us around, when you'd ask them, what can we do for you? How can we help the situation in Palestine? They say, keep visiting us. It's very important you keep visiting us. And tell the Ummah to correct its condition. Because the Aqsa is the thermometer of the Ummah. When the Ummah is at its peak in terms of Iman, you see victory in Al-Aqsa. When it is at its weakest, you see defeat. And it's true. Because when you look at the history of our victories in Islam, whether it's, Umar ibn al-Khattab or Salahuddin having entered Jerusalem at the time and so forth, where was the state of the Ummah? It was there. So Ramadan is an opportunity for us to conduct what we call self-interrogation, self-observation, muhasaba, muraqaba. Don't worry about her and her and her and her. Don't judge her and her and her. When you go to the masjid, don't worry about what she's saying, what she's wearing. Look at her, she's been sinning this whole year and she's here to pray and she's wearing, makeup and, look at her dress code. Put all the judgments aside, judge yourself first. This Ramadan. That's the first. The second, dua. Dua is critical, and I think we are very selfish with our dua. We put limitations. Yes, there are etiquettes around dua and how it is that you make it, but we put limitations in a sense where you can be sitting anywhere in the world and make dua and be in a constant state of dua. Don't miss 1 second this Ramadan. If you really want something, if you really want victory, if you really want to see Nasr, what are you doing about it? That's the spiritual. The second is the effort. Right? So our deen is a holistic deen. The Prophet ﷺ was not just a spiritual being. He was a spiritual and a political being. He was involved in advocacy. He was involved in entering treaties. He was involved in negotiating. And hence we must be the same. For those who are just standing and praying day in, day and night and making dua for the state of the Ummah and not doing anything else, you are cutting yourself short. And the other way around, for the activists who are only doing the advocacy and the lobbying and the activism and not tapping into and nurturing their spiritual, you're also cutting yourself short. It's holistic. So as believers, if we want to see victory on the other side of the world, know for a fact that you must utilize these upcoming months. It's our only, and the people of Syria today are testament to this. There was divine intervention. It was not the numbers, it was not the strategy, it was from Allah. So we need to be worthy of that and put in the effort this Ramadan, inshallah.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala liberate all the oppressed Palestinians, Uyghurs, and beyond. SubhanAllah, there's so many injustices happening to Muslims, non-Muslims as well, and it just breaks my heart, to know that we're living in this world where we cannot actually do anything. We're living in privilege and we can see injustices unfolding in front of our eyes. And I just cannot understand when people are just silent about it, because the fundamental of sunnah is about speaking up at least as a minimum, or of course reject in your heart. But just heart rejection is, I think, allowed for people who cannot speak, right? The weakest.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, one other thing, sorry, very important, we don't lose hope.
Yes.
We cannot lose hope.
Only shaitan, a'udhu billah, doesn't have hope, right?
So again, Syria is testament to this, but also Gaza. We're talking decades of occupation, oppression, injustice, and so forth, and they are still steadfast. There's this element of sumud that is unfathomable.
Believe in prophecy, subhanAllah. It's a fundamental of having taqwa. Believe in Islam and
so optimism is critical. And if the people around you are pessimists, keep them away. Only do what will get you further in terms of instilling hope and being optimistic in having something positive come out, inshallah.
MashaAllah. I mean, we spoke Ramadan is the perfect opportunity to basically reset ourselves physically, emotionally, spiritually. But and then I love that when you started to talk about Ramadan, both of you spoke about it being like a getting ready ground, training ground, right? But how to keep up, because once Eid coming, we're not even talking about healthy food, The Eid is like literally the gateway to stop being everything conscious in terms of food. And that's something that I experience, my family experiences. But then apart from it, all the practices, and I feel like you lose this barakah effect, obviously, once you stop practicing that. But how to keep up? So I would like to hear, what your advices and your tips, probably, the one that we can actually implement once Eid comes in. How can we keep up with our high level of iman, or at least keep up some basic things?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I think Ramia touched on this anyway. We have a concept in Islam of there's a numerical value. Numbers are quite important. It's not pseudoscientific to Islam to rely or look at numbers. So generally a habit is formed in the science and according to the sunnah at about 40 days, which is about 4 to 5 weeks, which is why we fast for 4 weeks. Nature has it that by that 4-week period, it should have become a habit. Waking up for Fajr, maybe you don't do it that often, should become a habit if you're doing it every day for 30 days, right? And the idea here is not, I don't like the term diet for this reason. It's a lifestyle change, right? So, you pray that you're inspired, now you wake up for Fajr. It should be able to, it's kind of like saying then you learn how to ride a bike and then you don't really need to put the training wheels on again, but you do because your nafs takes over and you contradict
comfort. You want to go back into
absolutely. And because this is the reality of the world, right? I realized not a very long time ago, but a handful of years ago, that if you want to live consciously, you are not necessarily happy, you are content. And happiness is an emotion, it's not a state of mind. And what that means, right, Guzelya was literally, October 7 for us, watching people, literally the first broadcasted live genocide in the whole entire world. And then the next scroll is a dessert dish coming out of Turkey. And then the next one is me taking a photo of my coffee. Do you know what I mean? And that is the condition of our heart, which is why I think what you say is important in terms of cleansing. And I'm a big believer that the cleansing of the heart is not mutually exclusive to the cleansing of the palate, which is why Ramadan is all about food. And when you said, Guzelya, it's the end of Ramadan is contradictory to what we were doing in Ramadan, not according to sunnah practices, of course, because celebration didn't mean overindulging in food. Celebration means God is gifting us days of seeing each other and eating together. And that communal effect is the celebration. But our tradition has changed it to, someone comes over to your house, you don't even read Quran, all you do is cook. So you've got 3 meals, 3 entrees, 12 desserts, none of those foods work together. You go to Taraweeh, you can't even hold your ablution, for God's sake. This is why food is so important. If you want to keep steadfast in being, and even in this day and age, I'm traveling, in order for me to keep my ablution so that I can actually go through Dhuhr prayer, I'm conscious of what I'm eating because I know I'm not going to be very comfortably having access. Can you imagine Melbourne Airport, take off my shoes and my socks, get my feet onto the wash basin? Some things I'm like, okay, I'm avoiding eating today and I'm comfortable with that because that's training my nafs and I'm going to be okay because I won't miss out on the Dhuhr. And then once I get home, do you understand what I'm saying? So,
but the level of consciousness also depends on where you are in circumstances that you face. Because just now when you were mentioning about taking off your shoes, and it's obviously not the case in Turkey or, Malaysia,
Qatar. If you don't, they'll frown at you.
So everywhere we have
comfort. Yeah, absolutely.
And what I noticed in Southeast Asia, there's another cultural phenomenon. I don't know whether it exists elsewhere in the world, but at least in Central Asia, we don't have that. So their Eid is 1 month. It's called open house. So throughout the whole month after Ramadan, people keep on coming to each other's house.
It's exhausting.
It is very exhausting, but people do it. You have the business open houses. You have families
Never
open
heard
houses.
of that.
Yes. So inshallah, if you come, you can experience.
Wow.
It is lovely in a way because there's continuation of the celebration, but it's exhausting. And it's very hard for your nafs, especially for those people who want to keep up fasting, the sunnah fast after the Ramadan. It's really difficult because you have to say no, or if you go, it's tempting. So
you can't eat. Yeah, I understand. And look, I think it all makes sense. And I think it's beautiful to have the opportunity because what you guys said before, one of you said, if fasting was not obligatory and it was a voluntary experience, we wouldn't have done it. True, because it's not the vast majority of us that fast on Mondays and Wednesdays, or Mondays and Thursdays, for example, right? So understanding that it's made obligatory and it's around the concept of food for you to understand the importance of food in your life and on your spiritual aspect and the empowerment. Yeah, like Rania said it so beautifully. And I'm going to give an example. Like when we're boycotting particular products, and everyone does their own thing. Some people can boycott some brands very easily. Like confectionery, I can do very easily. Other stuff are a little bit more challenging. And this is why we only allow Allah to judge us, because everyone, behind closed doors has a very different experience of the concept of boycott, right? But our community is so disempowering. I remember my daughter, one of the, she said, oh, well, I don't eat Nutella, whatever. And she was telling someone, and this is someone in our extended family, and they rolled their eyes and they're like, well, everything's just, supposed to be boycotted. Like, what can we do? And that was so disempowering for my daughter to think that as an just turned 8-year-old, I'm trying to do something for those children in Gaza to feel what they feel, to deprive myself of luxuries I would otherwise have. What would stop her from buying, eating, indulging? Nothing. We have the money, the resources, the time, whatever.
And alternatives.
Right. Yeah. And I told her the story of the ant with Ibrahim alayhi salam, where the ant carries the water to the fire. He doesn't carry water to the fire that is massive because he thinks he can extinguish the fire. He does it as a moral obligation of his consciousness, right? Mm. Like, it's, like you said before, you're responsible for the journey, not the end result.
Yes.
But you're not void of responsibility either. Yeah. You can't pursue a life full of eating bad foods, poor lifestyle, and then you develop colon cancer at 65 and then go, Allah gifted me with colon cancer, I'm submitting to this disease. Because Allah clearly states in the Quran, whatever happens to you that is not good is of you, yourself, your own doing. And whatever happens to you that is good, it comes from me, right? And I think so it's a very fine line between people understanding, if I pursue, which I speak about in my book, if I pursue as healthy a lifestyle as I can within my financial, intellectual, psychological, and social means, I eat well, I exercise, I try and eat organic, I supplement, I respect my time, so on and so forth. And comes a time I'm diagnosed with an autoimmune condition or a type of cancer, tawakkal. Then you say, like you said before, I've done what I can and Allah gifted me with this calamity to purify me, it's on me, right? But when you do everything that contradicts the Islamic tradition in terms of your food and your lifestyle, and then you get a disease, it's actually not really fair or common sense to kind of go, Alhamdulillah, Allah didn't give you a disease, dude. You gave your disease to yourself through your lifestyle that is in complete contradiction of Islam, and all of a sudden now you're religious.
Yeah, I like when you said like owning, like having ownership generally, right? Being responsible. And I think Ramadan is basically a guideline for us, definitely. Not only it's a training ground, but it's also like the moment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the model of how to perfectly live our lives, basically, right? So
the time too, Guzelya, that 4 weeks is enough.
Exactly, scientifically proven that these are enough of time to actually make a habit out of it.
Just to build on, because you're saying how can we maintain an element of consistency as well. The 6 days voluntary fast, right? Preceding Ramadan.
I love it.
We are beautifully weaned out of Ramadan, and then you have the sunnahs of Mondays and Thursdays.
Absolutely.
But to the spiritual aspect, and we talk about this in our circles, this notion of qalilun da'im khayrun min kathirin munqati'. Small but consistent is better than a lot and nothing. So what I normally say is we are on a spiritual journey. You want to at least look at your previous Ramadan and say to yourself, Alhamdulillah, I've now adopted this one small positive trait. What can I do this year? So if this year I enjoyed, I say focus on an act of worship that you enjoyed. And make sure it's differing each year, or you're building it up. Say I loved Salah. This year I indulged in Salat al-Tarawih. Obviously, you're not going to be able to do Salat al-Tarawih 365 days a year. It's impossible. We're human. But promise yourself, make a wa'ad to yourself that, you know what, I'm going to now adopt 2 sunnahs in the day. Qalilun da'im, small but consistent. So if you are able to extract, I say, don't be heroic, let's say 20%, even 15% of what you were able to establish in the month of Ramadan and consistently take that to the next Ramadan, you have won. You have taken on a habit that inshallah will be positive and change you. So it's about, again, being conscious. So when you're praying Tarawih every day, you're not going to question, do I like this, do I hate it? But be conscious of absolutely every act of worship that you are doing. If I enjoyed reading Quran, 1 juz every day, okay, I'm going to now read 2 pages every day after Ramadan.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
See what act of worship you indulged in, you enjoyed, and extract that outside of Ramadan, inshallah. So you can maintain that element of steadfastness, right, for the rest of the year.
Yeah, mashallah. I mean, I'm so excited, like, you know, that we started this conversation, and I think we can talk about it a lot. So just to wrap up our conversation, I think we're close with time. Of course, Ramadan is about setting up, resetting the goals, resetting the lifestyle. It is enough time to actually continue these habits, right? Because inshallah, it's like neurologically it affects us and makes us, more comfortable with it. It is proven to bring barakah. But now about like this contemporary world that's happening out there, like all these challenges that we face, we were speaking about Islamophobia a little bit, right? All of this is not only, we don't only have the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, but also this is something that Sirah teaches us, that, the Prophet and his Sahab, they already faced Islamophobia, they faced these challenges, the hijab was non-acceptable, right? So we are just reliving the cycle of oppression and, ups and downs of Ummah. And I also loved where you mentioned about that, the condition of Aqsa is literally related to the state of Ummah. And I think that is why it is so challenging for us to be good practicing Muslims nowadays, right? So just to wrap up, I would like each of you to share your vision, what you wish for Ummah in the nearest 5 years, let's say.
I'll go first.
Look, I think there's been an awakening without doubt.
For sure.
Right? And I have optimism in this awakening that, the Ummah has been revived. And unfortunately, my dad always, sometimes when you go through helplessness and despair, it's those elders that sometimes, subhanAllah, give you that boost of. And he reminded me, he said, look, if we're going to focus on something like Palestine, it sounds like a lot, because it's a lot, it's heavy, but it's only been 76 years.
Yeah.
Right? In the scheme of things, it's not much.
Yeah.
But what have we done during that time? So I have optimism. We must, I guess, then ask ourselves, how can we capitalize on these opportunities?
Yes.
I think, inshallah, especially, in light of the liberation of Syria from unfathomable oppression and injustice there, this is the start of something big.
Inshallah.
We will see a domino effect. But we cannot sit on the sideline and expect all the work to be done on the other side.
Of course.
If you cannot obviously contribute financially, with your time, in terms of charity and so forth, if there is absolutely nothing you can do and your hands are tied, just focus on yourself at the very least. So I hope that inshallah this Ramadan, and in fact the years to come, we are only seeing better states of minds and souls within us, so that we can see imparting change on the rest of the Ummah, inshallah.
Ameen. I love it.
I love that too. I like listening to Ramia. I agree with everything Ramia said, and I think from my perspective, I'm always going to say, and also it's not mutually exclusive that we look after our body as best possible, because when we have this conversation around boycotting brands like Coca-Cola that are definitely involved in arms sales and so on and so forth, like, are we even supposed to be drinking a liquid that is full of sugar, artificial colors?
That's what
we
I
don't
always
actually
say.
know what's in there because it's a proprietary, right? So to look at that from a holistic perspective, it's not about going, we're not going to drink Coca-Cola because we boycott that, and we will drink Salam Coke and Turkey Coke and whatever Coke. It's actually going, you know what? We don't need that at all. Actually, it's going to benefit us on a physical scale if we don't drink that food product, because it'll help, balance our blood glucose better. That'll bring more focus and clarity to our thoughts
as well. Yeah.
So in implementing Islam in its wholeness, it has a domino effect in every aspect of our life. Like Ramia said, like, just doing that one little tiny habit doesn't just mean you've got one good habit and you're getting hasanat. It also means Allah will create an opportunity for wisdom, an opportunity for more money if that's what you need, an opportunity for learning. You see something on social media that you're like, oh my God, like it happens to me, and I know it's AI, relax. But when you have an intention and you go, I really want to learn something, and next thing you know, you're talking to someone and they're involved in that industry or whatever it might mean. So I really think that I pray that Ramadan is an opportunity for people to go back to understanding what Ramadan is really supposed to be. In the area that I work in, from a physical perspective, waking up for sahur, making sure we're eating in 1/3 of our stomach only, and really understanding the concept of food, because as Muslims, we're not supposed to live to eat, we're supposed to eat to live. It is only a matter of survival. It is not a matter of satiating the ego and the nafs. And the more we feed our spiritual body, the more hungry our spiritual body becomes.
So we kind of upgrade ourselves from just halal towards tayyib, basically.
Which was also mutually exclusive.
Yes.
I mean, Arabic is not my native tongue, but every time in the Quran I read halal, I see tayyib. And, you know, as a non-native Arab speaking person that reads the transliterations of the Quran, right? And I'm always like, okay, so then, you know, halal slaughtering, for example, and I speak about this, is not just you know, jugular vein facing Mecca, or facing the Kaaba, my apologies, with all the basmala, which doesn't happen now anyway. But it's also about, was that cattle raised on grass?
Yes.
We call it grass-fed because cattle is raised on GMO seeds. We don't even understand the long-term ramifications of genetic modification on food, right? Is genetic modification even legally permissible in Islam? I think it's a debatable topic, but I don't think that there are enough qualified people to open, and I don't think there are enough brave qualified people, because talking about the topics that Ramia talk about,
and you talk about, mashallah,
takes a lot of courage. And even we in Australia, we have so much verbal oppression, right? People say Turkey is an oppressed country. Every conspiracy theorist says everything on national TV in Turkey. They are not oppressed in any way. I can't say what my mind thinks because I'm threatened to have my license taken off me, for example, right? So we really don't have freedom of press or freedom of speech. But if we go back to the sunnah and if we go back to the Quran, we don't need that freedom. We already have everything in our own backyard. And just to focus, like Ramia said, on the weeds in our own backyard rather than that of others will definitely go a long way, inshallah.
Wow, mashallah. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for leading by example, you know. And I believe that our state of our ummah is getting better, definitely, because just having this opportunity of being connected to ladies like you, you know, and like traveling all the way from France and then Indonesia, you know, and then coming here to connect with the community and see that in the Muslim minority country, you know, you are thriving, you are being able to create this bridge between the communities and the world. Mashallah, I believe that with this kind of exemplar and luminaries, inshallah, we have a great hope, and inshallah, we will achieve all our goals. Thank you so much for being here. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.